In March, I think it was, I got a visit from Matt and Nicole telling us that there was a possibility of them moving on to another position in another church. It was difficult news, but at the time, Matt also told the guy from our church who's a member here who works for our denomination, Jim Lacey. Not long after that, I got a call from Jim saying he heard about our situation, and he had a guy for us in mind. So I said, okay, send me his resume. So he did. And the day, Memorial Day, before the Memorial Day service across the street, Evan and I met in my office, and we had an interview. And then we went through the process of the search committee and received resumes. And as far as the search committee was concerned, Evan's resume rose to the top. And then we had them come in, meet with the search committee. Then the search committee recommended them to the church council. They met with the church council, and the church council will later on in our business meeting be making a recommendation to you today. So we have asked them to come today to candidate. They were already in the adult Sunday school class, and I interviewed them there, and we had time for a few questions. But I'm going to have them come up, and I'm going to interview them again. We're not going to do questions here because it's logistics, but in the gym afterwards, we're going to have potluck, and there's a microphone set up. So if you have any questions, then you can ask them at that time. So this is how we're going to do it. Have you guys come up, grab each one of those mics, and just stand here, and I'll just shoot questions at you like we did in Sunday school, and people can learn about you or hear again what they already heard. So, Dick, you can't fall asleep. All right, got it? All right. It's a little Sunday school joke. All right. Evan and Nicole, tell us how you came to Christ.
All right. Everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. So I was raised in a Christian home. My parents were believers. They took us to church as we grew up. So throughout Sunday school, vacation Bible school, that kind of thing, I had said multiple prayers of salvation because that's what they all said I should do, so I did. When I was about 8 or 9 or so, in the back of my parents' minivan on the way to church, I just kind of realized, like, I had said I was saved, I had said these prayers, but I just kind of realized, like, I know what it means to be saved. Like, I had figured it out at that point. I don't think I've done it. So I said a prayer to myself, and I said, God, if any of the prayers that I've said so far, if that wasn't genuine, if that wasn't real, I just want to ask you to forgive me of my sins, and I want to go to heaven when I die. And so then so that's kind of where it started, and I was able to grow in my faith through church. So that's kind of the start of it for me.
I also grew up in a Christian home, and I remember I was 5 years old, which is extremely young, and I was either watching or listening to some sort of Christian program when it clicked for me, like I understood, like that sin was disobeying God, like doing something bad was disobeying your parents. And so I kind of made that connection, and I realized that Jesus died for me, and that's how I could be forgiven. So I went up to my mom and I told her that I think I understand what it means to be a Christian, and I wanted to pray for Jesus to come into my heart. And so we talked for a little bit, and she sent me up to my room, and I kneeled at my bed, and I prayed, and I asked God to come into my heart and forgive me of all the times I did something wrong. And so, you know, the sun came through my window in a beautiful moment of salvation, and everything from there has always been about kind of figuring out what that means as I matured, because I was very young when I accepted Jesus, and I had a lot to go from there, but that's where it all started.
Where did you guys grow up?
So we both grew up outside of Detroit, right between Detroit and Ann Arbor. If you know where IKEA is, you essentially know where my parents still live, where I spent my life. It's like 10 minutes tops. So it's the city of Wayne, Michigan, right next to Canton there. So I lived there until I went to college.
I also lived in that city, not even a mile from where he lived. We met at a homeschool co-op, and as soon as we had decided to communicate the fact that we liked each other, I moved like 30 miles away. So then around the age of 16, I moved to a little town called South Lyon, which is near Brighton, if you have any idea where that is.
Closer to Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
Okay. You have been married for just over 2 years. How did you meet?
So in 10th grade, so we were both homeschooled from kindergarten to 12th grade. And so when I was in 10th grade, when we were both in 10th grade, my family joined what is called a homeschool co-op. Co-op stands for cooperation. So it's homeschool families working together to help educate each other's kids. We met once a week. Just did like science labs and stuff with parents who knew a little bit more than your own parents. So her family had been there for quite some time. My family joined when we were in 10th grade, so that's how we ended up meeting.
I was there too. So
Okay.
Same story.
That's good. It's good that you're both there. All right. What are your college degrees? And I have an idea of what you want to do with yours, but tell us about yours.
Sure. So my degree, we both went to Cornerstone University, graduated from there. My degree is in ministry and Bible. So it's kind of, that's why I'm here.
I have a degree in kinesiology, which is a fancy word for the study of movement. So, and I have double minors in general science and psychology. So I want to go into occupational therapy. And I currently am finished with my bachelor's degree, in between programs at this point to get that finished. But I volunteer at Mary Free Bed, the rehabilitation hospital downtown, just to get my feet wet and keep in the program for now. So.
Tell us about your ministry experiences, either informal or formal. None of them I don't think are paid, but yet. But tell us about your ministry experiences.
Sure. So my ministry experience starts way back. Basically, when I left children's ministry growing up, I went back to children's ministry as a volunteer. So I started 7th grade. I started volunteering in ministry, and that was part of kind of what brought me to where I am. But so I volunteered through high school, and then it was late freshman year of college that I ended up settling on a church, which is Sparta Baptist, just down the road here. I started attending there, so sophomore year of college, I started volunteering. I helped with the junior high and senior high programs on Sunday mornings, sat in just as a leader, led discussion with small groups. I have done teaching for the 2nd to 5th grade and sometimes preschool to 1st grade when they get really, really lucky, and I will say yes. But I have taught children. They're kind of on a rotation. I also did my internship for my school, required an internship, and I did it at that church. And they had me direct the midweek children's program. So they were like, hey, we need a director for next year, and you want to be an intern, so it looks like we have a director. So I ran that program. I helped kind of coordinate the volunteers and everything, and just made sure everything went off without a hitch. And then after I graduated from Cornerstone with my degree, the pastor of my family's church, who had been my pastor for many years over on the east side, said, hey, you have your degree, what do you want to do with it? And I said, I want to get some ministry experience. He said, well, how about you come over? We have a place that you can stay. You can live here in the church and just get some experience working with children's ministry. So that was last summer. I worked and basically was kind of a seasonal or interim director of children's ministry. So I helped run VBS and took some kids to camp and just had a blast. So, and then since moving back here, just stayed involved with the youth ministries primarily at Sparta Baptist. Yes.
He does a lot more with teenagers than he made it sound. He also teaches in the large group on a rotation with the youth pastor at SBC to do the large group Sunday school messages, and then we break into small groups, of which I am one of the leaders. So backing up a little bit, my experience started more so in the homeschool co-op setting. My mom is on the leadership board, still is, and so we were one of the core group of families who ran everything. So all the tear down, the setup, the children watching, and whatever else. So kind of started there. Did a lot of babysitting, a lot of childcare ministry sort of thing when we were busy. And it wasn't really until I got to college that I really got involved in a church ministry. So around the same time that he did, I started going to Sparta Baptist and started helping in the nursery. So that's what they needed at first. And then the youth pastor was like, hey, we also need volunteers for the children's ministry. And I was like, okay, cool. He's like, hey, we also need help with the middle schoolers. I'm like, all right. He said, also, we really need someone to help with high school. And I was like, okay, but I'm going to have to drop something. So I quit nursery at that point, but I stayed on rotation for teaching the preschoolers, as he does not so much love to do. And then I also have been helping in the large group Sunday morning services for the junior high and senior high, and lead a small group for the senior high girls that meets during the week that coincides with the teaching on Sunday mornings. So, and I also went with him when we moved and came back. So,
describe, Evan, your leading to go into youth ministry. Why do you feel that that's something that you should do, and that obviously you feel that God has led you to do this?
Sure. So there's kind of two parts to it. The first is kind of just my gifting. As I was involved with ministry, one of the things I realized is that I like to teach, and that I got good feedback and heard, like, you know, this is something you're good at. And so I started to have a passion for teaching. As I got through high school, I was trying to decide, like, what do I want to do? Do I want to do, like, teaching? Do I want to try and do ministry? What do I want to do? And so the other part of this is that youth ministry, youth group, youth pastors was a huge part of my life. The youth pastor I had for the first 3 years of high school was hugely influential on just growing in Christ and developing that relationship, just from speakers I heard at camp and their experiences with youth group, and just the relationships I had with other students. Like, I was homeschooled, so youth group was basically my friends. Like, that was pretty much it. So the relationships I had, like, just youth ministry meant so much to me. And I just began to realize that that not only was it teaching that I enjoyed, but just the relationships are so meaningful and can be so impactful. And I wanted to facilitate those relationships. I wanted to have that impact on people because it made such a difference for my life. So I went into school looking to go into ministry, and I'm still kind of working on that path. So.
Be involved in ministry, and as some of you already know, I started praying about age 12 that I would marry a youth pastor so I could be a youth pastor's wife. So, and I have gotten my wish, which is awesome. So I tend to thrive more in the small group sort of settings, the one-on-ones, the picking apart large group teaching type things. So I've kind of found my niche, even when he's been teaching at SBC, kind of going back and forth on his large group teaching and how I can pull that into a small group setting, and getting with my group and being able to analyze, like, what is it about what we learned today that, like, really means something to you, or what are you confused about, and being able to kind of break it down. So I really thrive in the small group setting.
Let's talk about youth ministry for a little while. What do you feel are the greatest needs of youth in ministry?
I mean, so first off, I've said this has kind of been my answer to multiple questions. So I feel like those of you who have been in some meetings are tired of hearing this. But the first priority to me is just making sure that the ministry is one that leads people to a relationship with Jesus Christ. Because if it doesn't, then it's just a bunch of kids hanging out. So youth ministry only happens when there's relationship with Jesus Christ. So it's the number one thing. But beyond that, one thing that's incredibly important to me is that teenagers, students learn to develop their own faith and own their own faith and know what they believe, not because pastor says so or because mom and dad says so, but because the Bible says so, and know what the Bible teaches. And because it happens so often where teenagers are saturated in church and in family, where they talk about the Bible, but they never really get into like the whys and the where does this come from in scripture. And then they go off to college or high school where they have experiences where people don't believe the Bible and just kind of accept that the Bible isn't true, and they don't know what to do with it because all they've ever leaned on is what mom and dad know and not what they know. So that's a huge thing for me, is just making sure that when they graduate, they know what they believe, because at that point, too often, if it's after that, it's too late. So that's a big thing for me. And then other than that, just as I've already mentioned, the relationships, an environment where relationships can be built that are meaningful and that are positive influences in their life.
You have had, your own experience has been with homeschooling. In this youth group, there will be homeschoolers, Christian schoolers, public schoolers. How do you connect with all those kids in all those different environments, meeting their needs in their specific situations?
Yeah, as I've already said, a lot of my friends, like pretty much all of my friends were youth group friends. So I have a lot of experience with public schoolers and Christian schoolers because you have all kinds in youth groups. So I had relationships with those people growing up. I've also learned a lot from college, just like how has my homeschooling prepared me for life different than my roommate who went to a charter school, and the guy in the dorm next to me who went to a public school, and my friend back home who's now the same age as me and he went to a Christian school. How is that different? And then like bringing that into just the experience we've already had. So it's something that I'm definitely familiar with and comfortable with relating to people of all backgrounds. And I think that one of the blessings of being homeschooled is sometimes homeschoolers are the hardest to understand. I can say that because I'm one of them. But I think a lot of people who don't have that background don't know what to do with homeschoolers. So I'm grateful that I've had that background so that I know what it's like to be homeschooled. I know what is needed for those people. And so I'm very grateful for that. And at the same time, still understanding different backgrounds of education. So.
And we've already had a good amount of experience at the church that we have been volunteering at up until this point. I mean, all kinds of different backgrounds there. I mean, different schoolings, different life backgrounds, so many different things. And the more time you have to get to know the group, the easier it is to kind of pull out those key truths, the things that are able to kind of bind everybody together regardless of where they go to school or what's going on. So again, we already have some experience with that kind of helping, but just being very sensitive to what the kids need individually, but also the group as a whole, so we can all function together in one cohesive unit. So just being sensitive to that.
How do you connect with kids? How do you connect with teenagers? How do you make those connections so that you're able to minister to them where they are?
Well, it's a challenge. The number one thing is just being there. It kind of seems obvious, but it's like you can't have a relationship with someone you don't see. And there's so many people are so busy in life. It's really easy to build a relationship with someone when you're there and when you're available. No, even if the parents are around, even if the parents are good parents, one more person who is able to talk to you, to listen to you, who cares about you, it just kind of happens naturally. It never hurts to have someone else. So I think that's just constantly throwing out the invitation, like whatever you need, we're there. We'll listen to whatever you want to say. And even if it's something that maybe shouldn't be said, say it, and then we'll figure out why it shouldn't have been said, and kind of go from there. So just just kind of having just a very openness is, I think, the biggest thing that teenagers look for.
We are also prone to enjoying somewhat childish activities, which makes it pretty easy to hang out with youth. So, just being involved in more context than just Sunday morning or just, even like out in the hallway. Yeah, we talked for a few minutes, but sometimes youth events can seem just like, oh, we're just all having fun, but you're building relationships. You're talking about things that maybe wouldn't come up in a normal context. So, I mean, even though like a Nerf gun war might seem trivial, however, that time together and talking and getting to know different areas of everybody's personalities, there's just a natural bonding process that happens during that time, so that when there is structured discussion time, when there are those moments where you're able to do a one-on-one or a small group setting and really get to the heart of some of these issues, you have a better, a more well-rounded understanding of the person you're talking to, not just a student who has a problem. So that also is able to help.
And Nerf gun war is not a random example. That is a real thing that has happened.
How do you connect with parents? How do you minister to parents of youth? How do you do that? What would that look like?
Well, by setting them free of their children once a week, obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
In all seriousness, I think it's really important to try and, in some contexts, integrate parents into the youth ministry. That can be as simple as a newsletter to the parents, just like, hey, here's what's going on this month. Not just the activities, not just where you need to have your kids, but here's what we're telling your kids. I think that can be really, really important to just kind of keep that going. One, for the benefit of the parents, but also so that the parents can then feed into that. If they know what you're talking about, then they can continue that conversation throughout the week and kind of help that. As far as more of a kind of a personal connection, I mean, like, let's just send the kids somewhere else and have a parents' night. Like, I'm good with that too. So, yeah, sometimes I like teenagers, but sometimes I'm like, I've been around teenagers so much, I need to talk to adults. So, yeah, just keeping them updated in any way possible and having them involved, maybe having family events.
And also recognizing that many of the parents of youths are volunteers in the youth events, the youth, whatever's going on. So just really leaning on that structure of parents who have a pulse on their kids, on the kids who are already here, who have a feel for who they are, how they've grown up to this point. Relying on that volunteer basis to inform how we interact and how we're able to in turn support you back. So kind of going off of your word to begin with of where everybody's at and just responding in a way that's the most helpful.
What excites you the most about the thought of being involved in full-time ministry?
A lot. Where I'm at right now is, so I work full time and do volunteer ministry, and it's just every time that I am able to attend an event or teach on Sunday or whatever, it's so rewarding, and it's one of those, this is who God made me to be. And so it's just exciting to have the opportunity to live that out, and not just like on a volunteer basis, but just be able to, like, that's my job. Like, that's awesome, just to have a job doing something that I love, because I love it so much. I love the relationships. I love, like I said, sometimes I need to talk to adults, but sometimes, like, adults, you're too serious. I want to go have fun with the kids now. So like just having a group of people just to kind of like hang out with, and like I love teenagers, and also just being able to have the impact on teenagers that my youth leaders had on me. And not because I want to seem so special, but because I want to point them to Jesus. And while I am very grateful for the influence of youth leaders, ultimately it worked because they were pointing me to Jesus. So just to be able to be that presence is incredibly exciting.
And For me, it's become more clear over the past couple of months just to be able to remove myself from the picture. I minister to certain people and we talk, and I'm seeing how God is working in their life, and to take a step back and fully understand it's not me. I didn't do anything. I simply let God use me, my story, my life, my words, my availability to reach into somebody's life and permanently make a difference. And I know it's a permanent difference because God did it, not me. So anytime I'm able to see just growth or change or anything positive that came about because we are simply trying to humble ourselves and let God work through us, is just such a joy to me, more than anything else.